Music Business Radio is brought to you by Avenue Bank, dedicated to serving Nashville's music industry. Find out more at thedifferenceisreal.com.
From Music City, USA, it's David Hooper and Music Business Radio.
From the TuneIn Broadcasting Studios in Nashville, Tennessee, this is Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper, and with me today, artist, singer, songwriter Beth Nielsen Chapman. She's written songs recorded and performed by Emmylou Harris, Willie Nelson, Crystal Gayle, Faith Hill, Bette Midler, Elton John. Beth Nielsen Chapman, welcome to Music Business Radio.
Great to be here.
I was only about a third down the list. So
I know, I was going to say, but what about?
I had to stop. So, Kathy Mattea, Trisha Yearwood,
Bonnie Raitt,
Waylon
Jennings.
Yeah. All of them. And you've been a session vocalist for Willie Nelson, Tanya Tucker, Kathy Mattea, T. Graham Brown, Suzy Boggus. You get around.
Gosh, you even know whose records I've sung on. That's amazing.
Well, I try to do my research. And one of the things that I found out about you is you're a military brat.
I am. My dad was in the Air Force. So we moved every couple of years. You had your box of stuff, and it was like, get your box, and we're going.
So you were born in Texas, which is, I would say Texas is a musical state. There's certainly a rich musical heritage.
Definitely.
I would imagine that influenced you in some way.
Well, I left there before I was 6 months old, actually.
Okay, so maybe not. But moving around would certainly influence your music, I would imagine.
But I got to go back there to sing on my song with Willie Nelson, so I felt like, hey, I'm a Texan.
You're an honorary Texan if you've hung out with Willie there.
Or even if you were born there, you know. Yeah, no, Texas is great. And, you know, everywhere I moved was an influence. And the fact that I moved around so much and I was experiencing people in all different geographical locations and different cultures, I found out what's the same about people. I think that was one of the biggest influences to me as a writer, is to get the common thread that runs through human beings, no matter what culture they're from.
You know, I've got to ask you what that is then. What's the same about people?
Everybody has the same handful of emotions and the same struggles in their life, you know, it's distilled down to love and fear and, you know, really basic stuff. And everybody has a great story. I mean, you could do a documentary on any person, and especially the quiet ones that you think they're kind of boring and there's nothing going on. Underneath that, there's always a great story. Every human being has a great story.
And I think that you just hit on something that's really important for songwriters, is that you have to have that universal truth in your song if it's going to have massive success.
Yeah, I believe that. I really do. And I mean, there are songs that get sort of pushed up and down the charts that 10 years from now you won't remember. And some of them are happening now. They're happening all the time. And then you'll have artists who may not even go up to the top of the charts, but the quality of their work and their voice as a storyteller, as an artist, transcends generation after generation. And I was driving along on tour last week, and my nephew's girlfriend was with us. She's playing cello in my band, and she was playing me some early Joni Mitchell. And I was so delighted that she was completely into it. And I said, you know, Joni Mitchell didn't really have very many big hit songs as an artist. She goes, really? I mean, she couldn't believe it, you know. And there are artists today having big hits, you know, one generation, two generations down, there won't be a young woman playing their song for somebody in her 50s like me saying, listen to this, you know, because to me, the quality of the richness of the great songs are sort of timeless and ageless and hard to come by.
And I think people that got into music during maybe Joni Mitchell's time, and I know you came after that. I don't want to.
I'm old.
You're
I'm
not that old. But
she was a huge influence on me. I was a teenager, and I discovered her records by way of my uncle, who's a musician, and he sent me her first record, and I was completely, you know, I had been listening to Tapestry for 3 years straight. You know, I'd worn those out. You could hold the LP up and see the light through. Yeah,
that's why it sold so many. You know, back when we had vinyl, you just wore them out and had to buy another one.
Yeah. So I mean, the singer-songwriters of the '70s were probably my biggest influence, and I was a young adult in fully on fire as a songwriter, influenced by them more than anyone.
And that's really what you were doing when you started. I mean, you were a career artist. Now let's talk about your time in Montgomery, Alabama, what you were doing down there. This wasn't the kind of thing that you were going for fame. You were an artist. You were a writer. You were a performer. You were out there working the clubs.
Well,
on a
in Montgomery,
basis.
Now, see, Montgomery, we lived in all over the place. And then when I was 11, we got our orders. We were living in Germany, actually. And we moved in 1969 to Montgomery, Alabama, which was in 1969 was pretty intense for somebody that had only lived on Air Force bases, and it was like a culture shock. But my family's still based there, and it's come a long way since then. But I mean, I had just gone to Dachau and just walked into a concentration camp, and was 11 years old on this field trip, and I was thinking, what am I doing? What? I'm too young for this. But it was an amazing, amazing impact on me about what people are capable of doing if they're blinded by prejudice or, miseducated about the worth of everybody. And so it was a big shock to move to Alabama. And thank God I had just started playing guitar and started writing songs. And the Vietnam War was raging. I had all these anti-war songs, and, it was a real outlet for me to maintain my sanity. And many years later, I started singing at weddings, and, eventually, the only real job I ever had was out of high school. I taught guitar at a music store in Montgomery for a couple of months, but I was really only like one page ahead of my students because I don't know how to read or anything. So
you're a writer first.
I was always a writer, yeah. And then I was always singing and writing were always intertwined. And I ended up moving to Mobile in '79 and getting married. And at that time, I had just done a record for Capitol Records with Barry Beckett producing. And I mean, getting to that point was kind of a long and windy road. And my first publishing deal, I was like 18, and my parents had to co-sign for me. My dad had to co-sign, and that turned out to be a terrible slave contract. But it was a good lesson for me because that contract eventually got sold to Screen Gems, and the guy got like $12,000 for my little 50-song catalog, and I was like, he got what? But at least I was with a legitimate company by then. So, but in my early 20s, I did this record on Capitol Records, and I had this amazing opportunity in Muscle Shoals Sound to be surrounded by David Hood and Roger Hawkins and all those guys that had just played on all those great records. And in fact, Bob Dylan had just been recording Slow Train Comin' right before I got there. And then, the week my record came out is the same week Disco Duck came out. And
that killed it.
That killed it. It was like the most devastating thing in my world.
You're listening to Music Business Radio. Talk about the finer points of major record deals with Beth Nielsen Chapman. How did you get that first deal? I mean, you were very, very young.
It was a deal that Barry Beckett had, like a 3-record deal, and he could go find 3 artists and produce 3 records. They just handed it over to him because he had been a part of so many great records, and he just thought my songs were great and gave me this great opportunity. And I didn't know. I didn't have a manager. I didn't have a clue.
Did you send him a demo? Did he see you in a club?
He came down to Montgomery and saw me in this band called Harmony that I was in, and I had joined this band like the year before. I had taken Tommy Shaw's place, and he went off to join Styx. It was in the bowling alley lounge in Montgomery, Alabama.
You think there's got to be some kind of lucky element about that band?
Well, it was
right?
a vortex. It was the only thing happening in Montgomery, Alabama. Yeah, but there was a lot of talent in that band. Bill Hines, Eddie Wolford, Jimbo Jones, great musicians. They're still all amazing musicians.
So he saw you, came to you with a record deal, and at that point, Harmony, I guess, was no longer. He was interested in you. Well,
no, actually, he. Another producer came, Terry Woodford. This is like you're going down into the veins of the thing. Terry Woodford came and wanted to sign the whole band, and we were halfway through recording, and then I said, I signed this thing a few years ago with this guy. And he went, what guy? What thing? And he saw this horrible contract I'd signed, and he put his head down on the console and just said, you're stuck in a contract. I can't even have your voice on these recordings. So I kind of got kicked out of that recording, while my band went forward and recorded with this guy. I went back and had to get a lawyer. And actually, it was the first time I had an actual music lawyer. The first time I had a lawyer, my dad just had a friend, and he was like a cattle lawyer. So when we were signing that contract when I was 18, I'm sitting in this guy's office in Montgomery, Alabama, and there's like steer horns coming out of the wall. And I tell my songwriting students, look, if you go into a lawyer's office and there's steer horns coming out of the wall, you got to get a music attorney, not a cattle lawyer.
And it's kind of funny, we joke around about it now, but that happens so often because only cities like Nashville, New York, Los Angeles have these guys who know about intellectual property. A lot of times, your buddy's like a real estate attorney.
Yeah, and they think they're doing you a favor.
Yeah. And
he looked at this thing and went, well, Bob, it don't look like she has to pay out any money. All she has to do is give him her songs, and he'll record them for her.
Right.
What could be better?
I know that's something that you feel very strongly about, is that songs and creation I mean, you can't hold it, but it is something, and it does have a lot of worth. So can you talk about that? What kind of songwriters are the invisible people that are involved when it comes to making a record?
Well, if I could have the microphone of the world for like 10 minutes and stop everybody from talking in all the countries all around the planet and just have everybody have a minute of silence and just everybody close their eyes and just imagine your life without music. Just imagine all those songs that you've been entertained by and fulfilled by and taught from and broke your heart and touched your heart and made you go, yes, I feel like that too. And I'm not even going towards all the other forms of art. Let's just talk about music. I mean, there is an amazing value in that. It has fueled millions and millions and millions of dollars. And the thing that's happening now is that there's this big argument between, oh, music should be free and we should have the blah, blah, blah. And I absolutely agree. Music should be free. But people who make money off of people who've written music shouldn't be allowed to not let the person who made the music have a participation in the money that they make, period. So if you are a guy that has a website that creates an opportunity for a whole bunch of people to go take a bunch of music that you didn't write but you just stick up there, and you're making money off of the advertisements and all the, you are making money. Nobody puts music up for free because they love music. All the people that are providing my music freely to other people are making money. So I'm not even interested in going after the person who's taking the songs at this point. You know, I used to turn on the radio in the 70s and the 60s, and I still do today, and I enjoy music, and it's free. But guess what? It's not free. Somebody has been, by law, required to feed the goose that laid the golden egg. So if somebody wrote a hit song, then they're going to be compensated by way of law, not because people feel good and they think, well, that's just right, I think I'll pay them some money. No, they don't do it that way. They have laws in place. And what happened with the Internet is that the laws to protect that income stream from being just given unto the people who just have the power because they have the website or whatever, they're not by law required, and therefore they're not paying. And then there's this sort of strange kind of tweaky thing where they've pitted young artists against older artists, and I'm interested in the young artists more than anything. My son is a brilliant young songwriter and singer. Ernest Chapman has a band, Team Illuminati. His wife has a great band. His friends that are in his band have other bands. They're amazing, talented young people right now struggling. And yes, they're thrilled to have the freedom and all the opportunities that the web provides them. And I'm happy for them to have those opportunities. I'm happy for my son to give his music away and promote it any way he wants to. But when someone else starts making money off of him because they take it and they then give it, then that's a different thing.
Well, he needs to be in charge of giving it away. So it's his decision to give it away rather than having it stolen.
Absolutely.
Is what I think you're saying.
Absolutely. And yes, the record companies have been abysmal. I mean, yes, we can go. And sometimes when I engage in a conversation with somebody about this and they're saying, they get off on this whole thing about all the mistakes the record companies made, and it's sort of like, yes, I won't argue with you. Lots of greed. I mean, back when I was first signed, my first record deal, I only got 10% of 10% of 1%, and it's like, they weren't fair, they weren't equitable, but at least I was able to make a living being a songwriter and an artist. Even though it wasn't fair, at least it was something.
Well, we've got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about that. I want to talk about your move to Nashville, how things were then, and how things are for new artists. And speaking of new artists, why don't we go out, let's play a little bit of your son.
Oh, great.
Introduce this for us, and then we'll take the commercial.
Okay, well, this is a song that he wrote called We Are. It's an amazing piece of music as far as I'm concerned. It's something that should be a hit on the radio. But I'm the mom, after all. You'll have to listen and decide for yourself. But he made this record with Matt Rawlings producing, and Matt's a great producer. He just produced Mary Chapin Carpenter's latest record. He's among many others.
So we are from Team Illuminati. More from Beth Nielsen Chapman when we come back on Music Business Radio.
A tiny sound from deep below. The open ground is reaching out. It lives between the lines inside of me. Sometimes I let it shout. I hear it in your voice beneath the veil of doubt. We are what we're searching for. We are the key. We are the door. We are the endless
this is John Hyatt, and you're listening to Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the biz.
Why can't you have a banker instead of just a bank? I mean, if your banking relationship consists of pushing phone buttons when a computerized voice tells you to, is that really how you want to bank? On the other hand, if you knew your banker by name, and more importantly, your banker knew you by name, then you've got something. That's how it is at Avenue Bank, because that's how we think banking and life should be. Avenue Bank. The difference is real. Member FDIC.
A man can go insane trying to make it in this game. I got a pocket full of change.
Hey, this is Will Hogue, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
From Nashville, Tennessee, it's Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper. With me today, Beth Nielsen Chapman. She's got a new album out. It's called Back to Love. It's available wherever records are sold. Beth, we went through the list earlier. It's just amazing the people that you've written songs for. Faith Hill, Bette Midler, Elton John, Alabama, Kathy Mattea. You co-wrote a big song for Faith called This Kiss.
Yeah, with Robin Lerner and Annie Roboff.
And you brought the demo.
I did.
Which we love digging in and finding the story. Before we get into that, though, I want to talk about how you moved to Nashville, because you actually had an interesting run-in with a very famous man in Alabama who encouraged you to come up here.
Right. Well, to pick up the thread, I'd done that record, and Disco Duck came out the first, practically the same time that my first record on Capitol Records came out. And then I got all these great reviews, and they said things like, gee, too bad she didn't put this record out 10 years ago, because it's brilliant. Because all that was on the radio was disco. And so I decided I had a real crisis. And, I teach a lot of workshops on creativity and songwriting. And I use this whole idea of, there's a moment in a young artist, songwriter's life where things usually collapse. And a collapse is really a great thing for your writing, even though it's terribly painful. But it forces you to kind of go down into a much deeper place and to come from a place as a human being instead of coming from a place as I want to be famous or I want somebody to like me or whatever that other writing arm is. And I literally just got so depressed after my record deal fell through and I lost my publishing deal. And I had just gotten married and I was living down in Mobile. And I was just making my living singing in bars. And I even stopped singing my own songs. I stopped writing. The only time I would ever pick up my guitar would be to go to work. And I had my beautiful son, Ernest, in 1981. And so for a couple of years, I was in major denial of, ever being a songwriter. Well, eventually, I started writing again. It took about 3 years to lick my wounds. And I was still afraid to send a tape. My husband had been begging me. He thought my songs were really ready to be, he wanted me to get back into it. And he was, threatening to start smoking again and all sorts of things to get me to send a tape. And I was like, I'm not ready. So I'm sitting there playing, 6 nights a week at the Riverview Plaza in this beautiful downtown hotel. And the Beach Boys come to town. And I'm sitting there, looking across the lobby from my little perch in my bubble lounge. And there's the Beach Boys, going up and down the elevators, and there's people down there in press. And this guy's sitting in front of me, and he goes, play another song you wrote, and I'd play another song I wrote, and then I'd play something else, and I'd play another song you wrote, and I'd play another one. And I'm, looking over his head, There's only a few people in the bar, and I finish my set, and I'm packing up my stuff, and I'm trying to get downstairs so I can try to meet the Beach Boys, because I thought that was really cool. And this guy was, standing there, and he's like, first of all, your speakers are out of phase. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay, so I don't care. I don't even care about, I don't even hear phase. And he said, and the other thing I want to tell you is your songs are really good. And I think you should get to Nashville or New York or L.A. as soon as possible. Because you played me 2 songs that were hits. And I'm like, and you are, and he goes, I'm Bruce Johnston from the Beach Boys, and I write the songs. And I'm like, really? And I thought, oh my God, it is him, and all of a sudden all the tumblers fell into place. And I was like, well, thank you. So I went from being really mean to him to being really all over him, So I went home that night, woke my husband up, threw $20 bills on his head and said, we're moving to Nashville. And literally the next day I was so motivated and and he got mad at me because he's like, I've been telling you for 6 months, And I said, you need somebody from the business to really give you that nudge sometimes, to really say you're okay. And I needed it.
Yeah, it wasn't just your husband's opinion. It was a guy from the business.
Well, it was somebody that, that knew. But, obviously my husband knew too, but it didn't have the same weight for me.
I want to take a quick segue here to talk about how you and I met, because this is just a really great example of you never really know who you're next to.
Exactly.
And so this is, a couple months ago. So I'm on a plane to New York. You're on a plane to New York,
yeah.
And it's a small plane.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, I think it was like
one of those elbow
two seats
ones,
and then one seat on the other end of the aisle, right? And I saw you with your guitar. I said, hey, you're a musician.
Yeah.
You know, dumb question. I'm just making small talk. And you're like, yeah, Beth Nielsen Chapman.
And I was like, oh, and he knows who I am. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I didn't. Oh, no. You know what I think it was? I think you were very cool. You're like, well, yeah, I kind of am. I said, have you done anything that I've known that I would have heard of? And you're like, well, maybe. You know, I don't know. And you hand me the CD. Yeah, I've got a CD, and then I had heard of you.
Yeah.
But you just never know who you're going to run into. You've always got to be prepared for that. It
Yeah.
could be some guy in your little hotel bar,
Yeah.
or it could be somebody on a plane, you know. And I'm definitely not putting myself up there with the guy from the Beach Boys who changed your career by being on Music Business Radio, but you never know who you're going to run into.
No, you don't. And you know, even people that aren't famous and stuff, they're great teachers sometimes. And, you know, I went through breast cancer 10 years ago, and all my hair fell out and grew back in. And that was the greatest lesson in just starting fresh about how I see the world. And one of the things I learned from that, believe it or not, was people can just look like they're not really worth your time. And that sounds terrible to say, but we all make these decisions of who we're going to go towards and who we're not going to go towards. And I learned to be a little more noticeable about, you know, the quiet ones, or the people that I used to just think, well, that's not, you know, anything. Now I just take everybody totally seriously because, I don't know, it just does something. You know, you just realize we're all amazing, really, in our own ways. And you know, when I teach, I try to imbue that in my students. Like, literally every person has 100% ownership of the piece of real estate that's looking out from behind their eyes. And nobody can tell your story. And your story is uniquely interesting. And it's interesting. I mean, one of my things that I love about teaching is feeling like I can see the little pilot lights going on behind their eyes when they realize, yeah, I can do this too, you know. It's really something that, I mean, creativity is often so overlooked in our schools and in our childhoods. It's buried often. By the time we become an adult, it's somewhat submerged, and I'm all about digging it back out and living it, you know.
You've had a lot of success as a songwriter, and your creativity now that you're living in a mansion and driving a solid gold car.
Oh, yeah. Solid gold Prius.
No, but seriously, now that you've had some success, is it easier to be creative now that you don't maybe have some of the monetary worries that you did when you were a starving artist? Or was it better back then when you were really hungry?
You know, I think creativity for me is always there. It's a flow that is always available, and we are at different times more or less open to it. And I know that I've had periods of time when I kind of collapsed, caved in on myself, and then I had to reboot, and then my creativity would just be rocking for a while. And I've learned to respect that there is an ebb and flow to my energy and my allowing of this. I always tell my students there's a hole in the top of your head, and creative flow is just there, and you can draw it in by doing some things, and you can open up more to it. I'm more creative, or as creative as I've ever been. My only complaint about life is that there's just not enough hours in the day. I've never been bored, not for 1 minute in my entire life. There's just been not enough time to get everything done that I want to do. You know, I'm working on a project right now. I'm writing and producing a CD for Deepak Chopra, yoga chants. It's all in Sanskrit. And then I'm putting out this record, Back to Love, which is all love songs. And I'm writing a song for a Scottish movie. You know, I'm doing all these things and wearing all these hats, and it's exciting, you know. It's daunting because there's just so many hours in the day, and I get to the end of the day and I went, damn, you know, I got to go sleep now, you know. But creativity is always rocking. It's always there.
You're listening to Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper. With me today, singer-songwriter artist Beth Nielsen Chapman. She's got a new album out. It's called Back to Love, available wherever records are sold.
And on iTunes and all those other good
Well, that's the only place records are being sold now. iTunes, Amazon.
It's available to freely download, but please think about the fact that I had to pay a lot of musicians to make my records, so, you know, be kind.
Yeah, spread the wealth, everybody. So you're working on some interesting stuff, though, and the actual transition, because you've had several major label deals.
Yeah, I've had every kind
variety.
Every kind you can have.
And one of the things that made you see that an independent album would be the way to go was kind of stepping out and doing a Latin record. You mentioned doing like yoga stuff and doing Sanskrit type stuff. So you're kind of branching out into multilingual.
Yeah, I've always done.
I've
always had that kind of parallel universe going on. But I was with Warner Brothers for 10 years, and you know, my very first record came out of the box with a hit called All I Have. And back then, it was right at the time that radio became deregulated, and really, to me, culturally, it went south in terms of just, now it just feels like so much of it is corporately owned and controlled, and that's a whole other conversation. But at the time, it was just on the cusp right before that happened. So my first couple of singles did really well, and I made a couple of records on Warner Brothers, and then my husband died of cancer in 1994, and I made a record after that. And Warner Brothers was wonderful during that time. Jim Ed Norman, who signed me, was a good friend and still is. They were incredibly supportive as I went through this transition in my life, and I worked with Rodney Crowell and co-produced a record called Sand and Water, which came out in 1997. And ironically, right at that time, all this stuff happened in the world. Sometimes the universe just things get in sort of a vortex of sorts. And right at the time that Sand and Water was released, the same year, months within the same time frame, Diana was killed, and Versace was killed, and Mother Teresa died shortly thereafter. There was a tremendous amount of stuff in the news and all over the world about grief and loss, and there was this sort of collective grieving going on globally. And Elton John called me up out of the blue. At first I heard he'd been on Oprah talking about the song Sand and Water and how much it had helped him through this loss. And
okay, so because I got to stop you there, so when he called you up, so you knew it was him. It wasn't like a friend playing a joke.
Well, I thought it was.
Hey, it's Elton.
I thought it was a joke, but no, it was like he's a really definite, recognizable voice.
Okay, so you'd seen him on Oprah, and you knew he was.
Well,
like
I had met Elton many years before. Actually, my husband and I met Elton in the early '90s because he sent me these 24 roses on Valentine's Day when my record came out, and he said, "I love your record so much." And he was in Hawaii, and he was in love, and he was playing it all around the clock, and he was tremendously helpful to me then. And then many years later, I ran into him I went with Bonnie Raitt, who's a good friend. I went to the rehearsals for the Rainforest benefit concerts in New York, and backstage was Elton and Stevie Wonder and all these people, and I didn't have anything to give him except this work tape that I had of Sand and Water, and it wasn't even out yet, and he had heard my husband had just died. This is like, within a year of him dying, and he said, how are you doing? And I said, well, I'm working on this. Anyway, so he took this and put it in his pocket, and so he knew that song. And then when the record came out, right at that same time, Diana had died, and his friend Versace, and he was going through tremendous grief. So he calls me up and says, would you consider tweaking just the third verse of the song where I refer to raising my son alone? He said, I'd like to sing this in place of Candle in the Wind on my tour. And I was so honored. And, talk about the creative process. I was of course I can do that. When do you need it by? Friday. No problem. Consider it done. Where are you? He goes, I'm in Atlanta. I went, great, I'll finish it. I'll drive to Atlanta. I'll bring it to you personally. So I'm driving to Atlanta in my car from Nashville. I still haven't rewritten the third verse because I don't know how. It's like it's such a personal song. And I'm like, please, please, I'm praying. 2 exits before I got to the rehearsal studio, the line dropped through my mind. It's just a more, generic line, but it's, came out beautifully. And I literally handed it to him, and I was sweating. I was so terrified I wasn't going to get to do that. So I don't know the line, unfortunately. I'd have to look it up. We could look it up. And
well, something that we don't have to look up, you've got the demo for the song.
I have the original demo, right?
And this is the one that he heard? Or he heard the
Yes, he
tape?
heard the original demo, and then he later on got a copy of the finished record, which is a beautiful, beautiful production. And, Rodney and I went through this whole push and pull on this demo. I was so attached to it because I recorded it, a few hours after I wrote the song, and it was like in my closet, in my studio, in my house. And I was so completely thought this is the perfect, version. And he literally said, I'm kicking you out of the studio. You're going to let me produce this record. This song needs to be broader. It needs to be able to be heard everywhere. And he was a steward to that song. And I'm so glad I listened to him. Well, I didn't listen to him. He just forced me, but I was glad he did. Because I love the demo and I love the record as well.
So when you say Rodney, it's like Elton, Cher. You're on first name basis with all these guys.
Right.
Rodney Crowell is who we're talking
yeah.
about. And we're going to play the demo on the way out here. When we come back, that's when we're going to play This Kiss. That's when I'm going to ask you about your trip to Nashville. You've got a lot of stories. We're going to have you back.
I know, totally, like the tip of the iceberg.
That's what'll happen when you've had a 40-year career.
Yeah. I mean, like, just the last couple of records I made, getting to meet people like Bishop Tutu and stuff, it's like a whole other chapter. It's been amazing.
So here it is. This is how to impress Elton John. This is Sand and Water. Beth Nielsen Chapman, she's my guest today on Music Business Radio.
I will see you in the light of 1,000 suns. I will hear you in the sound of the waves. I will know you when I come, as we all will come through the doors beyond the grave. All alone I came into this world. All alone I will someday die. Solid stone is just sand and water, baby. Sand and water and a million years gone by.
Hi, this is Vince Malamet, hawking my new album, What Matters Most, on Adroit Records. But most importantly, you're listening to Music Business Radio. Por todo el mundo. Mundo, 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 mundo.
Why can't a bank get back to me as fast as I get back to them? I mean, someone asks me a question, I give them an answer right there. But when you go to some banks for help and they tell you that you have to wait while they go out of town to get answers, that's just plain annoying. On the other hand, at Avenue Bank, all the financial decisions are made right here in Nashville. So when you go to Avenue with a request, you get a response, not a big delay. I like that. You will too. Avenue Bank, member FDIC.
Go on, circle honey pie. Tonight I'm gonna testify. You make the day to celebrate and you don't have to try.
Hi, this is Jim Lauderdale, and I learned everything I know about the music business on Music Business Radio.
This is Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper. With me today, Beth Nielsen Chapman. New album, Back to Love, available wherever records are sold. iTunes, Amazon.
My website.
BethNielsenChapman.com. So I've got a whole list of people that you've done songs for. Elton John, Alabama, Kathy Mattea, Trisha Yearwood. But we've got too much to cover for me to list the whole list. That would take the entire section. I want to know, when you moved to Nashville after your transition from Alabama, meeting Beach Boys and being encouraged there, did you have a plan?
Just to try to survive, yeah. No, I had a 5-year-old son, Ernest, and my husband, Ernest, was helping me out. He had a job as a counselor, and so I was making a few $100 and writing for Screen Gems initially. Then I was writing for Mary Tyler Moore Music. They signed me, and it took about 5 years. There's a lot of little stuff that happened leading up to, but one of those 2 songs that I sang for Bruce Johnston in that little club ended up going to number 1.
He was right.
For Lori Morgan, a song called 5 Minutes. That was actually my second number 1 hit. The first number 1 hit I wrote with Don Schlitz, a song called Strong Enough to Bend for Tanya Tucker. And that was amazing, and that song being a hit led Willie Nelson to becoming aware of me and asking me to write for him. And then I had a number 1 hit with Nothing I Can Do About It Now.
So once it starts to kick in, it kicks in big.
Yeah.
But that first 5 years, do you have any advice? Because we get emails, and I run into people all the time, and they say, I just moved to Nashville. And it's not uncommon.
How do I meet all those people, right?
Well, it's not uncommon to run into them a couple months later, and they're like, man, I'm heading back to Omaha.
Yeah.
Or wherever. So do you have any advice for them to, last here until they can break? Because I'm convinced that the music business has enough space for anybody who wants in, but you've got to want it badly enough.
Well, I think, there's only so many slots at the top, but I think you have to want it for the right reasons. And during times when things aren't happening on a how high am I on the chart sense, I'm deeply fed by being a musician and by being a songwriter. I mean, I wrote Sand and Water to help myself right through the grief of losing my husband. I wrote through breast cancer. Last year I had a brain tumor removed. I wrote through that, and that's what's on my new record. And I'm in perfect health now. But, all these big things in life, there's a lot deeper reasons to be doing the work. And at the same time, of course, I'm like everybody else. I want success. And when I first moved to town, I had ups and downs and a lot of frustration. One of the first things I would say to people coming to town is, you're going to know in your gut if it's for you, if you should stay or leave. Some people shouldn't stay, but the ones who stay have a better shot, and the ones who hang in there. And I tell my students all the time that, you know, people with less talent have more success sometimes because of they have a stick-to-itiveness that the others don't have. So it's not always just about talent. But if you have talent and you can get stick-to-itiveness, the combination of that's pretty unstoppable, but it takes way longer than it should. And the other thing I would say is, you know, when I first moved to town, Trisha Yearwood was the receptionist at the publishing company where I worked. I didn't even know she sang. I walked past her every day and said, do I have any messages? And on the other side of the wall, I was writing a song called Down on My Knees, and she heard it through the wall. And when, you know, a couple of years later when she got signed, she called up and said, I heard this song at the Bluebird the other night, and I think I remember it from back when you were writing it, and I want to cut it. And then she had a hit with Down on My Knees. And people say, well, how do I meet all these people? I say, guess what? You just fell off the turnip truck. Look to your left and look to your right. And the people that just fell off the turnip truck with you this week, 20 years from now, 10 years from now, they're going to be running the record companies, or they're going to be publishers or writers. And Bill Lloyd, Radney Foster, we were all wet behind the ears. We stumbled into town. We looked up to people like Rodney Crowell and Roseanne Cash, and that whole wave that was going on in the mid-'80s. They were like, how can we meet those guys, you know? But we were actually the people in the music business. Brent Mayer was young, just getting started. We were all young. But Alan Jackson delivered the mail. Garth Brooks couldn't get arrested, you know, walking down Music Row. He was singing on my demos, you know. It all rises to the next level. And you just, you know what, be nice to the people that are your peers.
Well, let's talk about Faith Hill, because she didn't just become Faith Hill overnight. No. She was doing that same kind of work. She
Absolutely.
was the demo singer.
And I first heard her at the Bluebird when she was singing background vocals for Gary Burr, who's a great songwriter, and he was trying to get an artist deal and, you know, doing his songs. And I was sitting next to Martha Sharp, who was the head of A&R, and I said, that little brunette girl, she had really dark, pixie cut, adorable. I couldn't even hear her voice loud enough, but I heard this timbre. I heard the top of her voice like foam on a latte, you know, and I said, if that girl can sing as good as I think she can, look at her. I mean, she's gorgeous, and she had this great presence. She had her personality, and I'm like trying to look around the guys in front of her, you know, to see her. And the next day, I think they called her into Warner Brothers. So I always kid her about, you know, I helped you get your record deal. But frankly, she would have gotten it anyway.
Well, let's talk about This Kiss. Huge song for her, and she's had a lot of them, but this is one of the biggest. Give me the story behind it.
Well, that was a song that was written a year and a half or 2 years before she ever heard it. We didn't write it for Faith, and we, of course, you know, Faith was having some nice success prior to that song, but that song really shifted it into high gear for her. And then she followed with more hits after that. But Annie Roboff and Robin Lerner and I sat on a beach in Malibu and wrote this song, and we thought it was going to be an R&B pop kind of smash. I always thought it was a smash hit. We wanted to pitch it to like Brandy or Patti LaBelle, you know, that kind of vibe. And so we even demoed it with like black girl singing it. And I've never been able to find that demo, but the demo that I love is the one where Annie is singing the lead vocal, because she is such a she's just got a great miracle way of phrasing. Now she would tell you, I don't sing, blah, blah, blah. She's got this great way of phrasing, and she's a great producer. And so I made her sing the vocals so I could learn how to phrase the song, so I could learn how to sing it myself, you know. So this demo, she'd kill me if I played it. But I'll play it for you, but don't tell her that I played it for you, okay?
Yeah, because nobody's listening to this show.
I can keep her from finding
So you're
out.
okay.
I just have such respect for her as a writer, and I think she's a great singer, but she'll kill me. I know she'll kill me.
Well, here we go. This Kiss, the original demo by Beth Nielsen Chapman on Music Business Radio.
Don't tell anybody.
I don't want another heartbreak. I don't need another drink to cry. No, I don't want to learn the hard way. Baby, hello. Oh no, goodbye. But you got me like a rocket, shooting straight across the sky. Now it's the way you love me. It's a feeling like this. It's central motion. It's perpetual bliss. It's that pivotal moment. It's impossible. This kiss, unstoppable. This kiss.
This Kiss, the original demo, co-written by Beth Nielsen Chapman, my guest today here on Music Business Radio. So sometimes there's more than one demo of a song, and this is one of those.
Yeah, this one went through many incarnations. So we thought it was a pop song. So then a year and a half after this got pitched all around, well, a couple of different versions with different black artists singing on it. Nobody bit. Then Annie heard that Faith was cutting, and Faith Hill was, at this time now, she was just a huge star on her way up to the next level. And so Annie said, you know what, we need to move it from keyboard to guitar and have a country singer sing the demo, somebody with a great voice. So this next demo is the second, and this is the demo that actually Faith heard. And Jamie O'Neill is singing this, who then subsequently became a big artist herself and is a wonderful singer. She sang this, and you can hear me singing the background vocals on this. But this is the one that Faith heard that sealed the deal. And within like 20 minutes when Faith heard this, she was cutting it. And the rest was like effortless. It's a beautiful thing as you watched it go into being the first single. And then the big
what they call flow.
Yeah.
So This Kiss, demo number 2 on Music Business Radio.
I don't want another heartbreak. I don't need another turn to cry. Oh, I don't want to learn the hard way. Baby, hello. Oh, no. Goodbye. But you got me like a rocket, shooting straight across the sky. It's the way you love me. It's a feeling like this. It's centrifugal motion. It's perpetual bliss. It's that pivotal moment. It's impossible. This kiss, unstoppable. This kiss.
This Kiss, demo number 2. Then, of course, the Faith Hill version. That's the one that most people are familiar with.
Right.
Big record.
And boy, they did a great record. I mean, you can hear fantastic stuff going on in the demo, but Byron Gallimore just brought it to the next level. And to me, one of the great marks of a great producer is to take what's working in the demo and don't discard it, use it and bring it up to the next level. And of course, the rest is history.
So that wasn't your first cut.
My first cut? No.
That wasn't it. But it was a pretty big one.
It was huge, yeah.
When you heard it, did you feel like, now I've made it? Or do you ever feel that way?
I feel like, to me, my career has just been fits and starts and incremental stepping stones, and it's always growing. And I look at success very differently than just the measure of the success of a single. But it was really, really wonderful. It's still to this day. I go and I teach elementary school kids and young people and stuff. And that song, even though they're really young and it was a hit in '99 before they were born, they've heard it, So that feeling like, some of your songs are kind of outliving the time when they were a hit, that's always a wonderful feeling, even if it is a struggle, in the challenges that we're facing in the music business today. My bottom line feeling is that those challenges will get sorted out, that the good will win out, and there will be more of a sense of security for young songwriters. And I think we all have to work really hard to get that. But This Kiss is probably one of the most wonderful things that ever happened, obviously, to me as a songwriter in my career. Definitely. And Annie Roboff and Robin Lerner, both fantastic songwriters. If you Google them, you'll see I was in really good company writing with them.
So, Beth, next up, we've got a section. We normally call it Dave's Demo Derbies. For bands from around the world, they send in demos.
Yeah.
We critique them.
Awesome.
I want to do that, but what I would rather do, because you brought your guitar here, I want to have a special section. I would just throw out the demo derby, and what we're going to do is we'll move that to the internet only. So if you want that, go to musicbusinessradio.com. We've got a special internet-only demo derby where Beth's actually going to critique, help some of these upcoming songwriters make their songs better. Coming up next, though, we're going to have you play live here in the studio with us.
Awesome.
Is that fair enough? We're going to talk about the new album. It's available everywhere. Back to Love. Beth Nielsen Chapman is my guest today on Music Business Radio. More from her when we come back.
Hi, I'm Jeff Cook. I'm a musician, singer, songwriter, and I've done record promotion for radio for 30 years, and I thought I knew it all until I listened to Music Business Radio.
On the web at musicbusinessradio.com.
Why can't visiting a bank be more like visiting your favorite neighborhood restaurant, where you walk in and are immediately welcomed and appreciated, where a banker actually greets you, shakes your hand, and calls you by your name, not by your credit score or your account number, but by your name? At Avenue Bank, we call that concierge service, and it may not be what you'd expect from a bank, but it's what you'd like a bank to be. Visit thedifferencesreal.com. Avenue Bank, member FDIC.
I swore that I was through until you.
Hey guys, guys, this is Dave Barnes. My life was crazy. I couldn't figure anything out. I'd play shows and nobody would show up. I'd forget my guitar sometimes, but then I started listening to Music Business Radio and everything changed. Thanks, guys.
This is Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper. With me today, Beth Nielsen Chapman. She's got a brand new album, Back to Love. It's available wherever records are sold, including Amazon and iTunes. She's written songs, recorded, and performed by Emmylou Harris, Willie Nelson, Crystal Gayle, Faith Hill, Bette Midler, and others. And, normally, Beth, this is the part of the show we call Dave's Demo Derby. It's where people send us demos and we critique them. But we're not going to do that this time. However, we are going to have a special Demo Derby. It's online, musicbusinessradio.com. We're going to go a little bit more in depth because in addition to writing, you also help writers.
Yeah, I consider that one of the most important things that I have to contribute during my time on the planet. I really love teaching, and I feel like I have a real talent for helping people get in touch with their core genius that they all have in there. They're all wearing those little red shoes. They just have to tap their heels together. And
you were talking to me during the commercial break that upcoming writers really don't have the stewardship or the mentorship that you did, and you're just trying to give that back.
Yeah, I feel like up-and-coming writers, especially those who are really destined to be songwriters like Hal David or Jimmy Webb, the young Hal David, the young Jimmy Webb, the young Harlan Howard, today in their maybe just turning 20s, they're not going to be given the same opportunities for publishing deals in today's climate, and hopefully that'll get rectified. But in the meantime, it takes 10 years, 20 years to develop into a really, really great songwriter. And you have to be able to make a living in the interim, and that's what publishers used to do, and that's kind of a difficult thing to have nowadays. So long story short, we have to take care of our young. We really do. We have to find a way to support them so they can grow into their full realization of what they're capable of doing.
So we're going to go deeper on that. It's at musicbusinessradio.com. You've got your guitar here with you, so probably what we're going to do is make you actually play and sing and try to really get deep and help with these guys with some suggestions as to chorus, hooks, lyrics maybe.
That. I'm very gentle.
But for now, the shoe's on the other foot.
That's right.
We're actually going to be critiquing you. You've got, like I said, your guitar with you. And this is some stuff that you're going to play us that's from your new album. That's called Back to Love.
That's right.
This is off your own record label.
That's right. BNC Records.
Forget these major label deals. You've done it all.
I have.
But what's the best part about having your own label?
Well, it's a lot of hard work, but the math is really excellent. If you can get a good team, which I do, I have a great distributor here in the States, 30 Tigers. They take good care of me, and I love working with them. And I have a different distributor, Proper Music, in the UK, and they're fantastic. And, I work with different distributors in different areas, and I have the control I've always had anyway, creatively. Even when I was on a major label, I was fortunate that way. But it's a very doable thing. It's a different kind of a system, but it's worth it, and it's been great fun. And I'm my only artist, so I get completely, treated like the queen.
You're at the top of the list.
Sometimes I'm the CEO, and sometimes I'm the artist. When the artist is really tired and doesn't want to do another interview, the CEO in my head goes, "What do you mean you're not going to do the interview?" Of course, I'm like Sybil. I'm calling all these personalities now, but as long as I maintain my songwriting abilities, I'll be sane enough.
Well, we'll be the judge of that since you're on the Demo Derby today. So what are you going to play for us?
I'm going to play Even As It All Goes By, which is a song I wrote with Annie Roboff, who I hope will forgive me for having had her singing this Kiss demo on the air. She's one of my favorite people to write with. And the third verse of this song was written after I woke up last spring when I'd had a craniotomy and I'd had a successful operation and a brain tumor removed that was pressing against my left frontal lobe. And it was like the first thing that came into my consciousness was finishing this song, which makes this song one of my favorite ones of all time. You could spend your whole life wanting what you don't have, tangled in the pain and strife, dragging up the ghost of your past. You can curse the rain, but the river remains, even as it all goes by. Baby, it's a long road to the promised land, and there are dreams we hold in the palm of our hands. We can never know how the story will end, on a fast train. Kiss me while the world flies past and the sceneries change. And as time rolls through, I will hold on to you, even as it all goes by. Ba 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 ba. Never be still, like the earth that spins. Where it ends, it begins, even as it all goes by. Even as it all goes by. Either way it all goes.
Beth Nielsen Chapman here in the studios for Music Business Radio, even as it all goes by, and that's available at iTunes.
It is. iTunes, my website,
Amazon,
any record store that's left standing. We hope there'll be more. And it's also available in Whole Foods, actually. I forgot to mention that. Yeah,
so,
I've got
let's talk about that. That's kind of a non-traditional place.
Yeah, well, I've got a good friend, Jimmy Dunn, who helped me get that put into Whole Foods, and all of my proceeds go to an amazing organization called Whole Planet, and they give microloans to women in far-off lands that they just need like $150, and it changes their life. They start their own business, and they can create a life for themselves. So go buy it at Whole Foods. That would be wonderful if you're going to go out and get it.
Thanks for tuning in. For more from us, including where to send demos for the Demo Derby, check us out online at musicbusinessradio.com. Beth, thanks for being here.
My
Thanks
pleasure.
for listening. We'll see you next week when I'll interview another industry guest. Beth, take us out.
This is a tune I wrote with David Wilcox, and this is for the children. A dust of malathion, just a hint of DDT. Diethylphthalate really makes the recipe. A chemical bouquet with names too long to say. Triglycerin and polytetrafluoroethylene. Arsenic and mercury down the river to the sea mixes with dioxins from the plastic trash. Tuna eats the fish that eats the fish that eats the little fish, and soon your tuna sandwich comes to bite you on the aspartame. Aspartame, that's the blue stuff, right? That's what they put in those diet sodas, ladies. And guess what? When it gets over 80 degrees, it turns into formaldehyde. Yikes! I know the wind is gonna blow and the clouds can't wait till the rain is clean. Round, round, the earth is turning round and we all live right downstream. Pressure-treated lumber, poisons where the children play. Baby drinks a bottle tainted with bisphenol A. Toxins down the drain, circle round as rain, popping up around us, never really thrown away. A trace amount of plasticizer thickens up the appetizer, right along with tartrazine, MSG, tetrabarminated diphenyl ethers mixed with butylated hydroxytoluene, also known as BHA. tea. I know the wind is gonna blow and the clouds can't wait till the rain is clean. Round, around, the earth is turning round and we all live right downstream. I know the wind is gonna blow and the clouds can't wait till the rain is clean. Round, round, the earth is turning round and we all live right downstream. And we all live right downstream.
Thanks for listening to Music Business Radio, a production of Tuned In Broadcasting Incorporated, Nashville, Tennessee. Recorded in the WRLT Lightning 100 studios. Music Business Radio is produced by Gary Crane, David Hooper, and Dan Buckley. Hosted by David Hooper. Engineered by Dan Buckley. Demo Derby coordination by Gary Crane and Jesse Smith. Special technical assistance by Tom Hansen. With Pro Tools post-production by Justin Hamill and Dan Buckley. And Lester asked for directions. For everything. For information on syndication, guest booking, Demo Derby music, or downloading previous episodes, visit musicbusinessradio.com.
Music Business Radio.
You've been listening to Music Business Radio, brought to you by Avenue Bank, dedicated to serving Nashville's music industry. Find out more at thedifferencesreal.com.